I'm about to teach, so I have to be very quick here, but I wanted to pick up a comment by Mark Dyer. Mark Dyer has put out a very interesting comment about the difference between Islamist chants and Islamic chants. Well, the expression Allahu Akbar is simply a statement in Arabic. You could hear it quite happily in a Catholic church in uh, in the Middle East, where the language would be Arabic. So you could hear it in the Catholic Church in Gaza or in Palestine, and so it's not specifically an Islamic chant. Islamist chants. I was quite careful about the words that I used. When people are walking around the streets with a knife and uttering even expressions like Allahu Akbar, then they are they're using that phrase as a threat. And I think that needs to be marked out as something different. So yes, Islam is a religion of peace. Mark Dyer says we need to re-educate ourselves out from the Bush Blair Johnson mindset fed to them by Islamic scholars, using the word scholars in inverted commas. No, there are such things as Islamic scholars, and thank goodness there are, because these people can identify the and can read and can recite the Quran, and can interpret it within the orbit of the Islamic tradition, and also within the orbit of our society. Mark goes on, because by now, and certainly after October the 7th, 2023, it has to be obvious that it is anything but peaceful. And as for those sobbing below about the horrors of the war against Hamas, on which Israel has had to become embarked, they need to lay the blame where it belongs, with Hamas. I entirely agree that the blame for the Hamas operation lies with Hamas, but I think the operation has been conducted wrongly. There are possibly still Israeli hostages in Gaza. There are still hostages in Gaza. We only saw the other day paper from from some hostage children and their scribbles, unless they've been starved, tortured, or killed. And thus far, Hamas do not seem willing to return them. Perhaps they cannot. Unlike Tony Blair, although I have 4 different translations of the Quran in my library, I do not regard one of them as worthy to be on my bedside table, so I might as well read from it at night. So that I might read from it at night. The Quran is the stuff of nightmares. You're wrong. The Quran is the stuff of great literature, and those people who know the Quran recite it. They don't even need to read it, and it's the most beautiful thing to hear recited. I have met people who are Hafiz, who can recite the entire Quran, and I bow to their superior memory and to their technique, and I am always happy to hear interpretations of Quranic texts, and indeed within the context of the traditions of this hadith or not, hadith or not, and this or that hadith, and equally, I'm always very interested to listen to people who understand more about the biblical texts than I do, and I spent a lot of time examining, particularly biblical texts and religious texts, and there's a great beauty in these texts generally. Many of them have very startling lines, but we shouldn't be focusing on individual words or individual phrases or texts. We should be focusing on the basic sum which these texts represent, and they represent a great contribution to our society, a great contribution to culture and to beauty. But thank you very much for all your comments.